Let's look at a few more quadratics that we're going to solve by factoring. So if you remember from the first video, we have to get one side equal to 0. So in example 3, I'm going to subtract the 15x. Now you have another option, but I like to leave this quadratic term positive. So now I have 3x squared minus 15x equals 0. Well, the very first way you learned how to factor, think about it. We always looked for a GCF, so you still need to do that. We always look for a GCF first. Well, this one happens to have a GCF. Notice that both terms have a 3x in common, so we're going to factor out a 3x and then ask ourselves what goes in that parentheses. Remember, factoring is just the opposite of distributing or multiplying. So it looks like we need an x and we need a minus 5. And so once we factor, our third step is to set the factors equal to 0. So notice, since we have that GCF out in front, that is a factor. So 3x could equal 0, and x minus 5 could equal 0. And then we're just going to solve 3 times x. We divide by 3, we're getting x equals 0. And then for our second solution, we're getting x equals 5. So you can kind of consolidate your solution. Now let's look at example 4. Still, it's a quadratic equation, and one side is not equal to 0. So I'm going to start by subtracting 7x, and that gives me x squared minus 12x, because if I lose 5x and I lose 7 more x, that's a negative 12x. Minus 64 equals 0. Now this is clearly a little more involved because we need to look for things that multiply to c. Well, in this case, c is a negative 64. So you may have to go through your factors. 1 times negative 64, 2 times negative 32. 3 doesn't go into it. 4 goes into it. I think negative 16. So, and then you could, of course, list all of them, but I noticed that 4 times negative 6, it multiplies to give me negative 6, and then I need to see what adds to give me that b term, which is negative 12. Well, notice those numbers are going to work. So we can now factor. This trinomial will factor into 2 binomials. So how do we split apart x squared? That's the easy part. We need an x in each parentheses. And then I'm going to use these numbers below. So it's a positive 4. So I'm going to write plus 4. And a negative 16, so I'm going to write minus 16. Then I need to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So in this case, we're going to get x is negative 4 for one of the solutions, and x is 16 for the second solution. And those are a few more factoring quadratic equations.